privilege to ask those that would like to participate in a moment of silence for their fallen officer. So if you'll please stand for those that want to participate. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Pinal County Board of Supervisors special session agenda. I'm going to take the privilege of the chair to take the proclamation and bring it to the top of the order of in which we're going to do this proclamation. So I hope you all have had an opportunity to read it on the board, and I should announce that Supervisor Goodman is not going to be participating, okay? So it'll just be the four of us. But anyway, anybody have any comments or about the proclamation? And if not, do I have a motion to accept it?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the proclamation as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. And Supervisor Surdy, we're going to read it?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, we don't really know the protocol on this. This is something we hope that we never have to do. So, and then when I'm through reading it, we do have Officer Ewer here from AJPD to accept it. And there will be a fundraiser today from 11 to 7 at Apache Junction High School in the north parking lot. And then the funeral services itself will be on Monday. So I'll now read the proclamation. By the Pinal County Board of Supervisors proclamation honoring the life and service of Officer Gabriel Fazio. Whereas Officer Gabriel Fazio, a dedicated and courageous public servant, served as a member of the Apache Junction Police Department for 3 years with honor, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the citizens of Apache Junction and Pinal County. And whereas on June 2nd, 2025, Officer Fazio was shot in the line of duty while selflessly responding to a call to protect others. And on June 8th, 2025, he succumbed to his injuries, making the ultimate sacrifice in service of his community. And whereas Officer Fazio's bravery and devotion to and duty to exemplify the highest ideals of law enforcement, and his presence will be deeply missed by his fellow officers, his community, and all who had the privilege of knowing him. And whereas Officer Fazio leaves behind a loving family, his wife, 2 children, and a grandchild, who now bear the immeasurable burden of this loss, along with the gratitude and admiration of an entire county. And whereas the Pinal County Board of Supervisors stands in solidarity with the Apache Junction Police Department and the Fazio family in mourning this profound loss and honoring Officer Fazio's life and legacy. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed that the Pinal County Board of Supervisors hereby honors the life, service, and sacrifice of Officer Gabriel Fazio and expresses its deepest condolences to his family, colleagues, and all those affected by his passing. Let it be known that his courage, dedication, and sacrifice will never be forgotten, and his memory will live on in the hearts of those he served and protected. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of Pinal County to be affixed this 11th day of June 2025. So I think we can give this to the officer.
Yeah.
And
Officer, please come up so we can present it to you. Yeah. Come on, guys. All right, everyone, we'll get back to some business here. First item on the agenda is a presentation and discussion of affluent generating and recharge and a whole lot of stuff that was put out on Facebook. So I'm going to prep the beginning of this with some statements, and then we'll have Arizona Water and the City of Casa Grande do a presentation on really how recharge and replenishment and how these programs really work. I think the most interesting thing about House Bill 2753 is it has very little to do with that actual mechanism that takes place. What this bill does, House Bill 2753, does provide a financial mechanism to allow water providers in the Pinal Active Management Area that are applying for a new designation of assured water, or a DAWS, to gradually transition the cost of replenishment groundwater from your property tax to a water bill. Because that whole mechanism is very, very complicated, but we didn't want providers to do a sticker shock, so there will be a phase out from property tax to the water bill in time. It won't change in the dollar amounts. It's just it'll be shifted to another area, and it gives it a 10-year ramp down or ramp up, either way you want to look at it, mechanism to the water providers. It allows providers to keep the cost of the replenishment obligation at a parcel level for up to 10 years. The House bill also does require the following to this period. The municipal providers must assume 10% of the parcel level's replenishment obligation each year until the cost of the replenishment is fully transferable. So I want everybody to kind of understand, House Bill 2753 really was more of like I said, a mechanism for transferring the cost from one area to another area, from your tax bill to your water bill. So for that, what it doesn't do, and this is some stuff that I've been asked to talk about, it does not that all water sources delivered to the customer must meet safe drinking water standards set by the federal government and the state of Arizona. None of that's changing. That legislation doesn't change any of that. So why people think it did, I don't know. It requires providers of delivery recycled sewage water to their customers for drinking, bathing, or cooking. It does not require them to do that. Does not. So from that, there's a couple more there, but I think we've hit home, and I want to get on to the presentation. I don't know how you've scripted it. Who goes first? Who wants to come up first? Introduce yourself, who you're with, and these people have taken time out of their busy days. They all have plenty of things to do, but I think it's important that the public understands that the state of Arizona takes a lot of, I don't want to say pride, but they're very, very cautious of how we recharge this water. We don't want to poison anybody. We have no intention of poisoning anybody. It's not going, we're just going to make sure it's done right. So please pay attention, and hopefully everybody will learn something. Thank you, Kevin. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Casa Grande. How's that?
There you go. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Casa Grande. I've been working with the city in that capacity for 19 years now, and wastewater division is one of my 8 divisions that I manage for the City of Casa Grande. And really, it's a pleasure to be here today to present how we reclaim our water from our waste stream and put it to beneficial use. And so that's what we're here to do, and I'll go through my presentation very quickly, and then, of course, at the end of our presentation today, stand for any questions that there might be. So I also have with me, if I get tied up with any technical difficulty, I have my chief plant operator, Clifton Sanders, is here, and he's been with the city for 20-plus years and is the person that really manages that process for us. We work underneath his certifications through the state, and he does a great job managing our plant. So our mission is to provide and maintain an effluent that meets or exceeds the federal, state, or local standards. And that's important. We could treat our wastewater to a lesser standard, but we want to take advantage of treating to an A-plus class water, which is the highest class that we can treat to, so that it expands our ability to reuse or recharge. It gives us the opportunity to really take the most beneficial use of that wastewater stream. We maintain an efficient collection system, and I'll get into some more details about our collection system, but it's important to maintain that collection system so that it doesn't contaminate the ground. And then we monitor our discharge through our different permits that we have through Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Just a couple of highlights about our wastewater collection system. We have over 500 miles of collection system within the city of Casa Grande, and it serves both city residents as well as some county residents that are near our infrastructure, and we've allowed them to tie into our system, and we treat their waste as well. And we have 550 manholes, and we go through an extensive process to maintain that system. We clean the sewer lines, we maintain our manholes on an annual basis, and then we monitor each of those lines so that we determine when they start to age to that point. No different than an asphalt pavement. When it starts to deteriorate, we need to do some corrective action, and we have that preventative maintenance program within our system. Our wastewater treatment plant, as it currently lies, is 18 million gallons a day. We are just completing a conversion. We were at 12 million gallon a day capacity. We're going to be finished in the fourth quarter of this year with our expansion to 18 million gallons a day capacity. And we have a future capacity of over 50 million gallons a day at that location if we choose to continue to treat in a centralized location for Casa Grande. We do have other opportunities, and we evaluate that on an ongoing basis. In 2024, we treated over 2 billion gallons of waste that came in from our residents and our industrial users. And again, we produce that A-plus quality effluent. We have 12 certified operators through the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality that work at our plant. 2 of those are grade 4, which is the highest grade that you can get for certifications. And if anybody knows anything about the wastewater industry, finding talented people is very difficult, so we have to really grow from within. So when our maintenance workers come on board, you can see how many of them have their grade 1 certifications, and then 2, and then 3, and then ultimately 4. So if kids ever thought about what they want to do for a living, if they can get over the stigmatism of wastewater, it's a great place to be able to grow your career very quickly if you can get through that certification program. And when we go out to the schools, we try to promote that as much as we can, but difficult to find certified operators. We're very, very fortunate to have the level of operators that we have in Casa Grande. And then our treatment process. So our primary treatment is basically to get any of the difficult debris out of that waste stream. If you have a swimming pool and you picture a rock going into your filter, you can imagine what that's going to do to your impeller. So now you have to imagine all the waste that anybody can send to us, what that can do to our systems that we have in our wastewater treatment plants. So that first thing is to screen that debris out so that we do not have to treat it and it doesn't impact our pumps in a negative way. And then our secondary treatment is our biological treatment process. And those are our aeration or oxidation ditches. And that's where we introduce our microenvironmental environment that we've created, basically our bugs that digest all the nutrients in our waste stream. If you've ever seen our aeration ditches, when I give the tours to the kids or the folks that come out to our wastewater plant, it's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory river. So that is the process that we do, but that's where the bugs work, and we start to digest that waste and get it to a place where we can then treat it through the rest of the process. Our next process is our clarifiers, and that's where we separate the liquids from the solids. Effluent is the liquid portion of that waste stream. The solids go in their direction, and I'll talk a little bit about how we process those in just a bit. But then those liquids are what turns into our treated effluent. So after those clarifiers, we go into our tertiary treatment, which is where we really just filter out all those fine particulates out of that effluent. And then we have to go through a disinfection process, and then which is basically chlorinate the water so that we get rid of any of the pathogens that might be in there, and then we have to dechlorinate it before we're able to discharge it. We are working on a plant expansion that's going to be finished the fourth quarter of this year, and then we have phase B of that plant expansion, where we're going to actually be utilizing, instead of chemical treatment for disinfection, we're going to be using UV, ultraviolet treatment, to reduce the amount of chemicals that we need to process our waste. Some of the key statistics, we serve approximately 60,000 residents in Casa Grande. We are planning for growth in the future, but all of our processes meet the ADEQ standards, as Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and we have 2 permits that we have to maintain. Our aquifer protection permit, which is renewed anytime we change our process. We go through an evaluation with the state to determine what that permit should say, what levels we have to meet that permit requirements. And so we get a new APP anytime we do a plant expansion. And then we have our Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, and that's what really governs that effluent when we're able to either discharge that or reuse it.
Kevin, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
How often does the state come and do inspections? Because don't they monitor your operation on some kind of a regular basis?
The best way I can answer that is whenever they want.
Whenever that's what I was pretty sure that was the answer. But
we do have regularly scheduled inspections where they come out and they look at our daily reports and things like that. But they can come out anytime they want and take a look at our process. And we encourage them to come out. We like to think we're the flagship of wastewater treatment. I'm sure there are better plants out there in the world, but we do a really good job of maintaining our plant and ensuring that we are right where we need to be for regulatory compliance.
yes, heavily inspected and heavily regulated.
Yes.
Thank you.
Probably too much, but we really don't have that choice. This diagram just kind of gives a line graph of our different treatment process. The upper process is the liquids, where we basically go through that secondary clarifier where it separates those liquids from the solids. We go through that filtration process, then we go into that chlorine or chlorination basin, disinfection basin, and then we dechlorinate, and then we discharge. And then our solids go through a similar process where we further digest that waste to a point where there's no anything that's going to impact the environment when we get rid of those solids. We currently use that effluent product, our solids, at our landfill. We use it as an alternative daily cover, which is also regulated by Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. So we have a permit to use that solids material out there, and we mix it at a 2-to-1 ratio with topsoil. landfills are required to have 6 inches of cover every day, and that's a very expensive process. So being able to use this product out there at a beneficial use really helps us reduce the cost to the city and our residents.
Excuse me, ask you a question.
Sure.
So, because you're talking about the solids, does it work similar to the digester process like they use out in the for dairy cattle?
Yeah, yes, very, introduce air to that system. It helps break it down and get rid of the nutrients that are negatively impactful on the environment. So once we get to a point and we test and meet those requirements, then we're able to use it at our landfill. There's also a lot of other ways you can use that solids material. You can land apply it for fertilizer and things like that, but we currently don't do that.
As you say, from a digester, it comes out as just plain dirt that really doesn't have anything. They use it for bedding for the cattle and they do all this stuff, but it really isn't good for topsoil because everything's been removed from it. So.
Correct. It's pretty inert at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
So our Phase 4A expansion, which will be finished in this fourth quarter of this year, we spent just over $32 million in that plant expansion, and that gets us from 12 million gallons a day to 18 million gallons a day. We've also expanded our solids handling capability with this step and improved our odor control. Our Phase 4B, which is under design right now, is where we'll be introducing the UV disinfection to our process, as well as putting odor control throughout our entire plant. But we're really trying to create redundancy in the process that we have and replace some of our older equipment so that we're a little more modernized and making sure that we're ready for that next growth spurt whenever that happens, but sure it hasn't slowed down of late. So we're continuing to grow in Casa Grande. So the Class A plus effluent, we just went over the different treatment processes that I showed you, but the approved uses for A plus water are listed right there. For Casa Grande's case, we use our effluent and send it directly to our golf course for irrigating the grass out there. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. But you can see the list of items that you're able to use that for. We also send it to SRP's Desert Basin power generation plant. They use it in their cooling towers. And then our most of our effluent gets discharged to the north branch of the Santa Cruz, and I'll go over that right now. So that is what's called our managed recharge facility. Now there's two types of recharge facilities. There's a managed recharge facility which you take advantage of a natural waterway to discharge your effluent into and then allow that to percolate into the ground and further get beneficial treatment through the ground process. But we have a 5.8 mile long managed facility in the north branch of the Santa Cruz, and I'll show you a picture of that here in just a second. But we're able to recharge 3,500 acre-feet of water each year. Now, we don't achieve that today because anytime it rains and there is water introduced into that system, we get zero credit for what we discharge. So anytime we have a monsoon, or in some cases, in our area, it's the San Carlos Irrigation District, they have points along their distribution system where they're able to discharge their water, and that goes into the north branch of the Santa Cruz. So anytime their flows have been introduced to ours, we get zero credit for that. So we have the capability of recharging 3,500 acre feet, but we don't achieve that because of other influences.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kevin. When you backed up 2 slides, you're saying where you pump it to the golf course, to the toilets, to all this. So you have to have a separate line running into those places. I'm looking at like fire protection systems. So like my home is covered. I have a fire sprinklers in my house, which flooded one day. It was real fun, but a whole other problem. But that comes just from the main line. And so how do you, so if you had fire protection systems in, say, industrial parks, right, would you have a separate line running to that industrial park? So then in that case, building code in the city, would you have the provision to say, well, okay, this industrial park or this area has to have a separate line for affluent water to come and service all these areas?
Yeah, I think it's commonly called purple pipe.
The purple pipe, I get it,
Right.
but I'm just wondering, do you have that provision in your city codes?
We don't have it as a city code, but we have the system in place. We just finished it's about an 8-mile long effluent delivery line into our industrial area. It's also an opportunity for us to have an alternative discharge point in the main branch of the Santa Cruz, but that line was developed to deliver effluent to our industrial users. And it is in place today. We're currently upgrading our effluent pumps to feed that system, and we're going through the process of negotiating with some of our industries the deal that we're going to make with them so that they can take advantage of using that treated effluent for cooling towers, fire protection, or any other use that is permitted. And so that way it doesn't impact the potable water use of those industries and really helps with the drinking water situation in our area. We have plans to be delivering this water to the mine that's going to be in operation in Casa Grande here in the very near future. They're really looking forward to having that opportunity to not have to use potable water in their processing.
Val Vista and MCG.
Yes.
Well, I'm just curious because when you do that to say the industrial park, you've already plumbed a building, and now you got to come back and say, oh, well, now we're going to do the toilets, we're going to do the fire system. There's a lot of replumbing going on there if it's established. I mean, thinking of Lucid, those kind of places. Yeah,
some of them actually designed those systems when they originally did it, but if it is going to be a retrofit, it's a separate system that has to be, because those streams have to be separated.
Yes.
There has to be a backflow so that there's no cross-contamination possibilities.
And my point being that there is some thought behind this someplace that's going on.
Lots of thought and lots of money, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a Google map look of our recharge facility. To the right side of the screen, the red dot is our discharge point. That's just north of our wastewater treatment plant, and then it goes 5.8 miles to the west. Now, part of our permit requires us to test the groundwater in that area. So we were required to build 4 groundwater monitoring wells as part of this permit. And it's hard to see on this picture, but they're up there, and we have to sample from those wells, test that water, and provide those reports to make sure we're maintaining our permit requirements. And we do that on an annual basis. Let's see here. And then the last slide here, soil aquifer treatment is basically, this happens when it rains, this happens when we discharge our effluent, this happens when any water hits the ground. That water is absorbed, and it goes through a beneficial treatment of the natural environment out there. So even though we've treated our effluent to a point that is safe to discharge, as that percolates through that system, it gets cleaner as it goes deeper through the ground. So that's how it's worked forever, and that's how it's going to continue to work. But we take great pride in meeting our permit requirements. We don't have to treat to an A+ standard. We do that for a reason, and that's because we want to take advantage of every drop of water, especially here in Arizona where water is gold, and it is the future, and we need to maintain that resource. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions for Kevin?
Steve.
Yes, Jeff.
On one of your charts there you had, and what purpose of this whole meeting is to put people at ease. It said it could be used for watering livestock with USDA approval. Explain how that would happen, because I know with effluent that goes into like an urban lake, is it really safe to, but it's safe for animals?
Yeah, and actually the one up there includes irrigating food crops that can be eaten, raw. So, I mean, each of those reuses have to be permitted. So each one is reviewed. So if a farmer wanted to use that for agricultural use, we would go through a permit process to get that approved. They would have to have a permit, we have to have a permit to deliver. So it's all looked at every time we make any changes to how we use that effluent.
So if you have a backyard garden and you have heads of lettuce and you spray it on the lettuce, it would technically be safe to eat still.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit up here and drink a glass of water of treated effluent just because I know how great Arizona Water treats their water. I would prefer to drink theirs than that, but it is totally safe.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? Kevin, thank you very much.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Terry Sue with Arizona Water.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Terry Sue Rossi, and I'm the Vice President of Water Resources for Arizona Water Company. And I've worked in the water industry in Arizona for 40 years. And I know what you're thinking. I look great for being 80. So, and I feel great for being 80. But the only advantage of being old is that you've seen a lot. And I think that the reason Supervisor Miller asked me to present today is because I've seen a lot of this picture over the last 40 years. So let me see here. This is the slide thing. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll just talk about a little bit of history, which happens that the first year that I began working in the water industry was, in fact, in 1986. And in the legislature, we passed the first recharge program for the state of Arizona. I was 21 years old at the time, and I was an intern working for the Natural Resources and Agricultural Committee, and that bill went through the committee that I was assigned to. And so my first segue into the water resources in Arizona was at the Arizona State Legislature at the time. In 1993, we created a groundwater replenishment district called the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and that entity exists today and operates, and it's still responsible for replenishing groundwater. In fact, it's the only entity in the state that is required to replenish groundwater. Actually, it's the only one who is authorized to replace groundwater. And then in 1994, we went through the process of streamlining the recharge program. So the original recharge program was established by the legislature. It was a little clunky, and my first job at the Department of Water Resources was to issue those permits in the Phoenix Active Management area. And so as a result of some years of practice, we understood we needed to modify the program. And so in 1994, it was streamlined into the program as we know it today. And the purpose of that program was to protect the general economy and welfare of the state by encouraging the use of renewable water supplies, which, by the way, is also the same objective for the Groundwater Code itself. And the Groundwater Underground Water Savings, Storage Savings and Replenishment Act was really designed to create a cost-effective method for water providers like Arizona Water Company and others that could not afford to build a surface water treatment plant. This was a much more affordable method and just as effective method of putting that water to use. And so the first permits were issued starting in the 1980s, and recharge has become a foundational element of water management in Arizona, not just here, but throughout the state. Before I talk too much about the program, I just want to give you a feel for the complicated nature of groundwater in the Pinal EMA. And some people don't really, or in Pinal County. Some people think of the Pinal County as being entirely encompassed within the Pinal EMA, but that is not the case. There are 3 active management areas in Pinal County. And so the state of Arizona is divvied up into 50 groundwater basins. Some of them are called active management areas because that's where we have higher levels of regulation. And then outside those AMAs, there are lower levels of regulation. As you can see from this slide, there are 3 active management areas inside of Pinal County, and there are areas outside of those active management areas. Arizona Water Company serves 3 primary water systems within Pinal County. There's what we call the Superstition system. That includes Apache Junction, it includes Gold Canyon, it includes Superior. We have down in the southeast, we have our Falcon Valley water system, which includes Saddlebrook Ranch, and it includes Oracle and San Manuel. And then our what we consider to be our primary water system, our largest water system, is the Pinal Valley water system. That includes a number of water systems within that, and it serves the Stanfield area, Arizona City, Casa Grande, and Coolidge. So it might look at the moment easy to understand, but if we go to the next slide, this is actually a picture of those groundwater basins themselves. So in addition to the active management areas, there are several smaller basins outside the active management areas that are located in Pinal, including Donnelly Wash, including the Upper San Pedro, including Dripping Springs, and also including the Salt River. So there's 7 groundwater basins within Pinal County, which makes for a more interesting water management picture. But let's talk about what's groundwater recharge. So groundwater recharge refers to the replenishment, and I'm going to use that in the more common sense, not as in replenishment that's done by the CAGRD, but as the replenishment of groundwater aquifer through natural, incidental, or artificial means. So natural is when, it rains, when it snows, and that water percolates into the ground. It finds its way to rivers and streams and ultimately to the aquifer. That's natural recharge, happens every day. Kevin was referring to that in his presentation. Incidental recharge is when a water user, like a municipal or an industrial or agricultural water user, uses water and then a portion of that water goes unused and finds its way to the aquifer. An example of this might be that you're growing crops, you apply a water supply, and some of that water is used consumptively by the crops, but the remainder of that goes to the aquifer. The final way to replenish the aquifer is through artificial recharge, and this is where a water provider or others intentionally add a non-groundwater supply to the aquifer in order to offset groundwater pumping and to augment water supplies for the future. And they do that through these legally permitted recharge facilities. And Kevin mentioned that the city of Casa Grande has a managed recharge facility that is one type of facility, and I'm going to talk more about some of those in a minute. But let's talk about replenishment for a minute. So replenishment is the function of replacing groundwater pumping considered to be in excess of sustainable levels. It is conducted through artificial recharge facilities that are legally permitted. And again, it's the same facilities, and we'll talk about those shortly. The difference between replenishment and recharge is that replenishment happens after the groundwater pumping has occurred. The other difference between recharge and replenishment is the responsibility of replenishment currently lies solely with the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So no other entity has that responsibility. Everyone else would be recharging it, and that would be something you would do in advance of recovering those credits. The legal sources of water for recharge or for replenishment. So basically, it's any water supply that is not a groundwater supply. And in Arizona, we're typically looking at Central Arizona Project water, CAP water, Colorado River water, surface water like, say, Gila River water or water from the Queen Creek, and effluent. Effluent is the only supply that requires an aquifer protection permit, which is an additional level of regulation that Kevin referred to. On the right, you can see there are two. These are actually constructed recharge facilities. They're both located inside of Pinal County. One is the Superstition Mountains Recharge Program. That one's located in the Phoenix Active Management Area, and it's owned and operated by CAP. The one below is the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Project, and that's located in the Pinal AMA, and it's owned and operated by Arizona Water Company. Let's see here. So let's talk about the different types of permits. So I mentioned to you earlier that the program was revamped in 1994. When that was done, all of these different permits were created, so you cannot operate a recharge project in Arizona without these permits in place. So you need underground storage facility permit, you would need a groundwater savings facility permit, depending on the type of facility that you want to operate. So you have to have a facility permit. There are two types of underground storage facility permits, a constructed facility and a managed. Casa Grande's facility is a managed facility. Of the 12 constructed facilities in the Pinal AMA, 2 facilities store CAP water and 10 of them store effluent. Of the managed, there are 3 in the Pinal AMA, 1 stores CAP water, and actually it should say 2 store effluent, not 3. So there are also these groundwater savings facility permits, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how those processes work in a moment. But there are 4 in the Pinal AMA, 3 of them store CAP water, and 1 stores effluent. So anyone can store water at a storage facility in Arizona, a legally permitted storage facility in Arizona, but they are required to acquire a water storage permit. So whether or not you own the facility is irrelevant. Even if you own the facility, you have to have a water storage permit. There are 50 such permits in the Pinal AMA, and whether you're going to store or recover that water in a single year, you have to have that permit, or if you're going to store the water for the long term, say for future when there's a shortage, you would still have to have one of those permits. Everybody who gets a water storage permit has a long-term storage account. It's like a bank account, and the Department of Water Resources posts the number of credits that you've accrued in that account. Finally, to get that water out of the ground, you have to have recovery well permits, and that's a different process. And each of these permits have a very rigorous application process, and each of these permits have conditions that you have to comply with, and you have to report that information sometimes on a quarterly basis and then always on an annual basis. So in the Pinal AMA, there are 207 recovery well permits.
Real quick question, Ms. Chair. So we were talking about the two projects. One was holding water, the two ponds that you were showing on the side, those recharge ponds.
Yes.
How do they recharge? Is that percolation?
Yes, these just percolate. So what happens is, and by the way, I wanted to mention that I brought my recharge hydrologist with me, Mr. Dick Thompson, and his is his encore career. He is our recharge hydrologist. He spent most of his time with the city of Tucson operating their recharge program, which is quite extensive.
So those are, I'm sorry to back up on you like this, but they're pretty large projects. How long does it take that water to get, like how deep's the water table? How long does it take the water to get there? But how long does it take those ponds? How often are they recharged for that? Are you maintaining a constant level? Are you having to pump it? I'm just curious because evaporation and then the fact that it doesn't really go too far into the ground.
Yeah, so it depends on the facility. And since we have direct knowledge of the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Facility, I would ask Dick to come up and give a very brief answer to that question because he keeps track of this all the time, so he knows exactly how long it takes from it to get to the surface.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
down.
Thank you.
I went to the ribbon cutting of that facility there the day they turned water into it the first time. Anyway,
Cool.
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Your name.
So I'm just curious because we see it's a recharge pond. Okay, great. So it's percolating.
Right.
So okay, it's percolating at X rate. So it goes down. Some more water comes in. I mean, how do you balance that? Maybe that's kind of an open question. But.
Okay. When you start one of these, like at the beginning of the year, when the pond is dry, you flood the pond, and then that water slowly saturates the matrix from the bottom of the basin to the aquifer. At Pinal Valley, that's about 150 feet.
Okay.
That can take several weeks to a couple of months before you have a direct contact from the basin to the aquifer. Once you establish that contact and that ground is saturated, then that water moves quickly through the matrix. And so the water that you're putting in like today, which is about 7 acre feet, that water is pushing down and moving by gravity into the aquifer, and it's pushing the water that's already there into the aquifer. So it's like a train that you've established.
Right, so it just depends on the geology of the area too, because you might have caliche layers in there that would stop the water from moving. So,
Yes.
do you have to break that up to make that happen, or like puncture it essentially?
There's different ways of handling that. At Pinal Valley, it's sandy silt all the way to the aquifer.
Okay,
so
well
it's not a problem.
that's a good spot. Okay.
Now, other areas like down in Tucson, they have a lot of caliche at some of the recharge projects. And what happens there, if you run into a confining layer, and you might run into a confining layer that we don't know about under a recharge project, usually what happens is gravity takes over and the water just moves sideways until it finds a way down to the aquifer.
Okay.
Just like it's spilling water onto a coffee table
Sure.
and then it runs off the side.
Okay. Well, you answered my question. The geology of the area is sandy, so it goes through it. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And if you were wondering, I believe what Dick meant by the Matrix, I just got done watching the Matrix movies. What he meant by the Matrix was the soil beneath the
Not Mr. Smith.
right, not
Okay,
not
just
Mr. Smith. So, all right. So I think we talked about this, and this actually is kind of a picture of what Dick just described. So I kind of feel like we kind of got a picture of that. So you can see he was talking about the matrix would be that vadose zone, that's that dry area, and the little lines are the water going down. Once that connection's made to the aquifer, things go pretty quick. It doesn't really matter the source of the water. It could be CAP, it could be effluent, it could be a surface water supplies. It just can't be a groundwater supplies. And it could go into a recharge basin, it could go into an injection well. There are a variety of methods, or it could be a managed facility like what the city of Casa Grande operates. This is just a location of where all the ones that are currently permitted in the Pinal AMA are at. Not all of these permits are actively used, but these are permits that have been issued. The groundwater savings facilities, we talked about this. I find that this is a little bit harder for people to understand than a recharge project. So in a groundwater savings facility, and again, it doesn't matter the source, you deliver the water to a farm or to an irrigation district. That's what those little green things are, is a crop, I guess. And then instead of the irrigation district pumping groundwater, that irrigation district doesn't pump the groundwater, and they take your water. So that's why there are those two lines in that well column that says reduce pumping at production. And so instead of pumping the groundwater, they use the non-groundwater supplies, and then that saves groundwater in the aquifer, which is what's represented by that more blue color down in the aquifer itself. That's the water then, as a water provider, you get to go ahead and recover in your recovery wells. And this is the location of the groundwater savings facilities in the Pinal AMA. So I will just add about this is that there is not a one type of facility is better than another. These are just two different methods, and depending on your situation, one facility might work better than another, or a combination of facilities. So let's just kind of talk for a few minutes about how much this tool is being used. I talked about back in the 80s and the 90s when we passed that program. So we've been storing water in the ground for a long time. This graphic represents all the water that's been stored in the active management areas since the inception of the program. That's 13.36 million acre feet, over 4 trillion gallons. To give you a perspective, Arizona Water Company today uses about 20,000 acre feet a year of water. This would be a supply that would last us 668 years. Now let's take a look at effluent. And again, this is all effluent that's been stored in all of the active management areas since the inception of the program. And so 1.45 million acre feet of effluent has been stored. That's about 472 billion gallons. That is roughly 11% of all the water that's been stored since the inception of the program. And that's in all the AMAs. Now let's take a quick look at what's going on in Pinal. And by the way, this data is through 2022, so 2023 and 2024 are not included in this. So in the Pinal AMA, of all the water sources, there's been about 3.2 million acre feet of water stored. That's about 1 trillion gallons, and that's all water sources. And then of effluent, there's been about 27,350 acre feet, or 8.9 billion gallons. That is not even 1% of the total water that's been stored in the Pinal AMA. So storage in the Pinal AMA has by far been through CAP water. So let me talk just a little bit about our recharge program. So we consider recharge to be an extremely important part of our water management strategy. We are currently storing at 3 groundwater savings facilities. We've been doing this since 2015, and those facilities are those 3 irrigation districts that we're all familiar with. We own and operate the Pinal Valley Recharge and Recovery Facility. We've been operating it since 2020, and Mr. Thompson is our recharge hydrologist, and he's very good at what he does. And will become in the future, we become a sewer provider in the Pinal AMA, and we will absolutely include effluent storage and recovery. And then we own and operate 24 recovery wells that we use to pull that water out of the ground each year. So here's just a quick picture of Mr. Thompson's recharge project. And last year, we stored about 1,300 acre feet. We started storing in 2020. This year, we'll store 1,600 acre feet. And next year, I hope that we push up to 2,000, and we'll be operating this facility at its optimal levels. So last, what I want to do is kind of talk about our water resource strategy and kind of how some of this stuff all fits together. So At Arizona Water Company, we have two water resource strategies. One is to secure and maintain a diverse water supply portfolio, and two is to promote the efficient use of all the water supplies that we have. And I'm going to actually start with the second one first because I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the first one. So when I say we promote the efficient use of all water supplies, I mean every single person, every single entity, including Arizona Water Company, and including the city, including the county, we all are going to use our water efficiently. It doesn't matter whether the customer arrived 100 years ago. It doesn't matter if they aren't going to arrive here for 10 years. Anybody who lives here is going to use their water supply efficiently. And it doesn't matter the type of use. It doesn't matter if it's a golf course. It doesn't matter if it's a home. It doesn't matter if it's a cow, landscape watering that you brought up. It doesn't matter if it's Lucid Motors or the Wendy's, right? So everyone is going to use water efficiently. And it does not matter the supply source. So we don't care if it's CAP water. We don't care if it's effluent. We don't care if it's groundwater. In fact, those supplies are all commingled together. So it doesn't matter. We live in a desert. We're going to use every drop of water we have as efficiently as possible. So that's one piece of it. We also look at using the water efficiency as a type of water supply. So if we use our water efficiently, then we will not have to go out and acquire as much water as we would otherwise have to. But let's talk about the diverse water supply portfolio. So our goal as a water utility is to provide a reliable and sustainable water supply to our customers under a variety of hydrologic and operational conditions. So my boss does not ever want me to say, oh, gee, we can't deliver water. So my job is to make sure that we have a diverse water supply so that under any circumstance we can provide that water. So that's kind of tricky. And if you were to have a completely redundant water supply, then you would be looking at a much more expensive water supply and much more expensive costs for providing water. So we are balancing that redundancy with affordable prices. Redundancy of the water supply, redundancy of the infrastructure as well. And so these supplies become very important in this whole thing, and recharge becomes very important. Groundwater is an important source. Even groundwater itself is a diverse water supply because you're pumping from multiple wells, so you're not dependent upon one particular source. CAP water, as we've learned in recent years, is not as reliable as we thought that it would be. So you need the groundwater to back up the CAP supplies. We also need effluent. Effluent is the only source of supply that continues to grow. So groundwater, we have basically a finite amount of groundwater unless you artificially recharge it. There's a small amount of incidental and small amount of natural recharge, but for the most part, it's a finite amount. And so effluent is the one supply that grows. So it's a really important resource from that perspective. Recharge is important because that's the primary mechanism we're going to use to create that balance of the redundancy and create an affordable supply for our customers. So it all works together. And if you'll just humor me for a moment, if you looked at water resources the way you would your retirement portfolio, you would start to understand how this works. So, for example, your 401k is essentially the groundwater that we have. So you have a certain amount, or at least I have a certain amount of money in my 401k, and it's not limitless. And so I have to figure out how to make that last over my entire lifespan. One day, I hope to have Social Security, and so that's going to come in every single month. So that's like a renewable water supply. Maybe I have an annuity somewhere. Maybe I have a pension. Those are going to come in on a monthly basis. And so I need to manage my groundwater supply. I need to manage my 401k to last throughout my life. I do that by using my renewable supplies, and then maybe I go out and get a job, and I recharge my account, put a little more money in it. Maybe I get a part-time gig, something like that. And so if you look at the way you manage your water portfolio, that's essentially the same way that we manage our water supply. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I think my job is to pass the mantle off to David Dunaway, who's going to describe, once the water's recovered, what he does to make sure that it meets drinking water standards. Unless there's some questions.
Any questions for Terry Sue? Great. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dave Dunaway. I'm the general manager of Arizona Water Company's Pinal Valley water system. But 24 years ago, I walked into a windowless room to start looking at rock samples and old well records to help farmers find the best place to put their wells so that they could make sure their cows were watered and their crops were grown. 23 years later, I started at Arizona Water Company, but had a number of stops at ADEQ, where I was a manager over a portion of the Safe Drinking Water Program, and then the entirety of the Aquifer Protection Program, including wastewater and collection systems. Then after that, in between Arizona Water Company, I worked for CAP, where I worked for the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. So I've seen all facets of what we've talked today.
So you're saying you can't hold a job?
Yes, or I'm good enough to bounce around
Just
at
checking.
least, right? I'm at my forever home, though, I will say. So I want to begin my discussion on the safe drinking water, providing safe drinking water with the regulations. We start with literal acts of Congress in terms of the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which has gotten modified every couple of years. That turns into federal rules in the Code of Federal Regulations, which tells the states how to implement programs which protect safe drinking water. Arizona itself then comes up with its own statutes to help make sure that we cover all aspects and go above and beyond the federal government in limited cases. The state has its own administrative code where it tells the water systems how to go about providing safe drinking water. The state also provides engineering bulletins that, kind of separate from the regulations, might get into a little more detail about how you design a water system. Arizona also has substantive policy statements, which is the version of if you're in a discussion with your spouse, no, what I meant to say was this. Then the non-substantive policy statements, which aren't in writing, but you have to kind of pick up between the lines. That was about a minute just going over the overview, but there's even more because it goes beyond just safe drinking water. Well, our labs and our samplers are governed by regulations from the Department of Health Services. We at Arizona Water Company are regulated by the Corporation Commission as a public service corporation. If we're going to make sure we supply water all the time, we've got to make sure we have emergency generators, which are covered under Title V of the Clean Air Act. Then there's the disposal of waste properly. It takes a village and a team of experts to do this, and that's even before the shout-outs in Terry Sue's arena, where, oh, by the way, to get a designation of assured water supply or a certificate of assured water supply, we got to make sure that we're obeying ADEQ in order to make that happen. So before we've looked at a length of pipe or a treatment plant, we've spent a lot of time on governance, and I do challenge folks to find a more thoroughly regulated industry than we are. In the theme of my discussion, as well as was Kevin's, well, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than just the regulations. So if I've oversimplified those regulations, let me oversimplify what a water system looks like. Here in the Pinal Valley system, or in the Pinal Valley system, we're based primarily on groundwater. So we start with a well, but that well can be over 1,000 feet deep, and that's what we primarily use as our source water. It's more of an accounting thing about the recovery than it is the production of water. Now, if you've ever struggled with a shower curtain rod, size that up several dozen times so that it can produce hundreds of gallons a minute. It takes a lot of engineering and thought in how you design and operate these water systems. But after we get the water out of the ground, we have to chlorinate to verify the water is free of bacteria, and that's our very first treatment step. And that happens universally at all wells for Arizona Water Company. Some of our wells, we do have treatment where we pull out harmful chemicals like arsenic, nitrate, or fluoride. And when we do that, we test at those treatment plants constantly to make sure that they're working properly and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Much as I saw on the drive here over to Florence, we then store the water in tanks to make sure that we can meet peak demand and we can meet emergency situations. Before water even goes into the distribution system at people's houses, well, we're testing even more there, but then just to make sure, we also test within the distribution system near people's houses so that we have a full and thorough understanding of what the water is where people drink it. Once every 3 years, the friendly folks at ADEQ do pay us a visit. So I can echo Kevin's sentiment of they show up as frequently as they like, but no less than once every 3 years. And when I was talking about sampling in a number of locations, oh boy, there's a lot of sampling. The state and federal government in the Pinal Valley system every year would like us to take 938 samples. And that's a lot just by itself. But we don't stop there. At Arizona Water Company, we're taking over 3 times the number of operational samples that we hold ourselves to make sure that we are serving safe drinking water above and beyond what the government wants us to. And in a case, as you can see, where there's a 0 for treatment verification and a 0 for tank samples, despite thousands of pages of regulation, we're taking samples in places the government didn't really ask us to, just to make sure the water is safe and we understand it from start to finish. Before I started at Arizona Water Company, and what sold me on working here, despite a claim of job hopping, was it was described as compliance is not an option. It's a drop-dead requirement. As a former regulator, somebody who's worked in water a long time, that was music to my ears. After decades of working in water and public health, like I was saying, there's just compliance down here, and then there's where we are. Now, these water samples are sent to state-certified labs, again, with their own body of regulation. We are very lucky in Arizona to have really good ones here. But even then, for a handful of the really complicated tests with stuff I don't want to pronounce in a public venue, we have to ship those samples out to California and Ohio because there are so few specialized equipment needed to detect down to these super, super tiny levels that we need to for compliance or above compliance in our case. But who takes those samples and who runs those plants? Trained and certified experts. Out of 295 Arizona Water employees overall, all of our systems, our support staff, just about half of us, 135, hold at least one level of certification. 34 of us in Pinal Valley are certified operators, again, about half of our 70-plus staff. Now, in drinking water, there's 2 kinds of certified operators. You hold one license to operate the treatment plants, and you hold another license to operate the distribution systems. There's 4 grades in each class. The first one is the first step. Grade 4 is the pinnacle of your career. And so the table there gives the breakdown of certified operators and their level, both for Arizona Water Company and Pinal Valley. Something very interesting, you tend to have the most either at the begin or the end of your career. We've got the most, first level grades or the 4th level grades. Folks tend to stay at Arizona Water Company a long time and progress through their career. So you'll see a distribution where you've got more at either end. The data nerd in me really enjoys that. Legally speaking, though, you technically only need 2 certified operators, one that holds certifications at the grade of your water system and your distribution system, and one more as a backup. We have many, many more than that. How does one become a certified operator? Well, state law says you have to meet minimum requirements for experience, education, general knowledge, and at each of these levels, you have to pass a 100-question test developed by a national board of experts. So at Pinal Partnership about a week ago, there was discussions of workforce development, right? How do we make more operators? We are trying to do our part. We work with Central Arizona College to develop training classes and bringing certification exams to Pinal County rather than having to go to Phoenix or Tucson. And I've made sure that bottom photo was a little fuzzy so no one was forced to take the math or look at the math that's required. I myself hold grade 4 certification in water treatment, water distribution, and even wastewater treatment. So Clifton, if you need me to pick up a shift, sir, let me know. I'll drop on by. Also, most utilities require you, or most utilities let you take samples your very first day on the job. Not Arizona Water Company. You have to be a certified operator before we'll even let you touch a sample bottle. Why do we need this level of expertise? As you can see on the screen, water is so much more complicated than just turning on a tap. The top photo is one of Pinal Valley's nitrate removal plants north of Mission Royale. Kind of hard to make out, but each one of those 5 treatment vessels has a myriad of valves, actuators, electrical panels, ways of bringing water in, taking water out, putting it to backwash, putting it for disposal. And that's a lot of stuff that people have to keep track of. More of a zoomed-in photo on the bottom is a pilot test we recently conducted in Coolidge to better remove fluoride. Despite being in a Connex box and about 130 degrees, there's over a dozen input panels, 9 sampling ports, multiple chemical pumps, and 1 very loud air relief valve. Simply stated, treating and delivering safe water so that our customers can turn on the tap is a very detailed and complex process. But I encourage you not to just take my word for it. All water systems are required to publish a consumer confidence report each year where they document the water quality and the sample results. So I encourage everyone to visit our website, www.azwater.com. The header at the top, look for water quality. Very first on the link there, consumer confidence reports. We are just about to put up 2024's water reports here in the next couple of weeks. Final thought, on a personal level, I live in Casa Grande within our water system. My kids drink the water. I drink the water. I took this job here in Casa Grande because I believed in the people and I believed in the company. So I am just one resident of Casa Grande, but I believe in what we do. And I put it to the test every day. I'm not going to jeopardize my family. And the same is true for the rest of our leadership team. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I think that wraps everything up. I'm happy to take questions or bring up the appropriate person.
Any questions? Mr. Surtee, you think we covered it?
I think over-covered it, actually. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, and seriously though, I want everybody to understand how regulated the water systems are, how much regulation goes into supplying water to the residents of Arizona overall. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have probably some of the top operators in our county here, but it's not what was depicted in Facebook at all. It's not even close to that. So I want everybody to understand that we really do put a lot of effort in ensuring our water supply is safe to all Arizonans.
If anything, Steve, obviously all of the water companies are very safe. One of the questions might be if there is recharging going on and there are private wells in the area, how do we know that the private wells are not affected and getting some runoff from what's being recharged? That might be a question that
they can pull samples and send them to a lab, can they not? I mean,
Yeah, so-
you can have your water tested anywhere. I mean, there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, so I mean, there's a two-pronged approach in that case. One, there's engineering design requirements around the recharge basins to make sure that nearby wells are not impacted. But as Chairman Miller pointed out, there are various county programs that will sponsor well testing and work that the Department of Health Services does to help folks with private wells also test their water. That being said, the water that's being recharged is of incredibly high quality. So you're putting good in, so good is going to come out.
And you have to understand that people are worried about this. I mean, it happens with the copper mines. They're worried that Resolution Copper, which is actually below the water line, they're actually operating below the water line, there was a big controversy here in Florence about Florence copper. What is it going to do to the aquifer, et cetera? So those are questions that still might be out there, that this is totally different, and what's happening with this recharging of effluent is completely different.
Completely separate, sir, yes.
I'm interested.
I'll just quickly add, all recharge
Identify yourself and then just kind of tell us.
Sorry. All recharge facilities, and it doesn't matter if it's a constructed recharge or a managed recharge, effluent or CAP, you have to have, as part of your permit, monitor wells that are positioned around that facility. And by the hydrologic models, they will be your canary in the mine, so to speak. You will see how that water has changed as it went through the aquifer, and you'll see the water quality of it. And you report, usually it can be anywhere from monthly to quarterly to semi-annual. You'll report that to the ADQ and ADWR, and you have to show that nothing's changing, that you're putting high-quality water in the ground, and what's in the aquifer at that point is that quality or better. And usually because you're mixing it with the aquifer that is already the natural aquifer there, usually the quality is even better than what you started with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you identify yourself? I'm sorry.
I'm Dick Thompson.
Dick
I'm
Thompson,
with Arizona Water Company.
And Chair, Mr. Thompson, one more quick question. So you monitor wells. So how far are your monitor wells from your injection well? Just roughly.
It really depends on your permit. Mm-hmm. And what they do is before you ever get your permit, you have to run a hydrologic model and say, this is the aquifer, this is how the groundwater is moving in that area. This is how we're going to either inject or recharge through spreading basins. And this is what we predict where the water will go as it hits the aquifer. And so then you position those monitor wells as close or as far as you need so that you have time to react to any changes.
So assuming that the water is flowing underground, then you would put it in the direction of the flow or the downslope of that geologic area.
And usually on recharge facilities, you bracket them. You put them not only up, you put them upstream and downstream, sure, so that you can say, okay, this water that's moving through the aquifer at this point, it comes in like this. We've recharged the water, and here's the water that's moving away from the recharge facility.
So for a simple question, like quarter mile, half a mile, less than a quarter, that's all I was really asking. Okay.
Yeah, and it depends on the velocity of the groundwater.
Certainly, I understand that, but for big picture, quarter mile or less.
Or less.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor 32, I want to just, if somebody goes out, they drill a well, and they question the quality, there's organizations, or the state will test that water. You can get it to a testing place to find out if your water quality, what it is, and what's in it. I mean, the exempt wells, the 35 gallons or less, are all over the state, but those there's availability to have that water tested, and if there is a concern, I would suggest that a person have it tested.
Yes. And this is a concern of most of us because not all of our residents are in incorporated areas, which they don't have sewer, they have septics, and they have their own sources. So it is important to people.
Yep. So
I have an anecdote from my experience down in Tucson. We had a very large recharge facility, and when we came online, we reached out to all of our neighbors that had the 35 gallon per minute wells and said, we'll test your well. We'll test it before we start and after and during so that you can see how it changes. And we had a small response, but we did that. And one of the really nice things that helped our public perception of this was there were so many of those people that lived around us that were thrilled that their water levels were coming up.
yeah.
And it wasn't just all the CAP water, it was this CAP water pushing the natural groundwater up as well. So all of a sudden, they no longer had to worry about their wells going dry in the next 10 years.
Yeah. No, it's a really good program. So I hope this puts some people at ease on their water supplies, and I can't thank the three entities, the City of Casa Grande, Arizona Water, and the two divisions of Arizona Water, to do this presentation. It's very important. We'll put it out on our social media and website so other people can see it and direct people to watch it in the future. Thank you for everything.
Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, for the record, the presentation that was presented today, it has been submitted to the clerk, and of course, it is also available on the agenda item as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So it's available for anybody to review that would like to see it. Okay, moving along. Item number 2 is a presentation and discussion of micro-trenching. Micro-trenching. Who's presenting here? Mr. Wanamaker.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Chris Wanamaker, County Engineer. Yeah, today I'll be talking about the lovely topic of micro-trenching. So what I'd like to do with this presentation and talk a little bit about what micro-trenching is. Many of you may or may not know what that is. Talk about some of the pros and cons of micro-trenching. Talk about what our county's proposed standards are. Talk about some of the feedback we received from industry about those standards, and then get your feedback and questions on that. So to begin, what is microtrenching? So microtrenching is a method for deploying fiber optic cables for internet service and communications in thin, shallow trenches, typically in the pavement section. These trenches are anywhere from a ½ inch to 4 inches wide and 10 inches to 24 inches deep. So they're very shallow in the pavement section. So that's what we're talking about here. So microtrenching is something it's not really new, but it's something that is being pushed and demanded by the industry and also the public as the consumers have an increased need for high-speed internet access. So pre-2020, broadband demand was growing predictably, slowly, and steadily over time. But of course, after pandemic, we started to see much more demand for high-speed internet. We got all our Zoom calls and conference calls and internet-based learning for students in schools. And so our internet service providers are trying to find ways to get high-speed internet to every home in America. And of course, there's also a federal program called BEAD. That's the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is another way to incentivize getting high-speed internet to everybody. So with that said, we're seeing an industry push to do new methods to get internet installed, fiber optic installed in the infrastructure quickly and at lower costs. So that leads me to our why. Why are we considering adopting our own standards? Well, for one, we don't have any microtrenching standards. So when an internet service provider or a fiber optic utility company, they want to come in and put that infrastructure in, they have to meet current standards, which is traditional trenching or boring methods, which can be expensive, can be time-consuming, very disruptive to the public, a lot of traffic control, a lot of potential utility conflicts. Another consideration here is that the existing state of practice when it comes to this type of installation method is kind of a hodgepodge of different ideas. Many jurisdictions don't even have microtrenching standards. Some allow it, some don't. And there's a lot of different schools of thought on what should be allowed and not allowed. And also the industry, again, they're desiring modern solutions to build their networks to support the mission to get high-speed broadband to everybody in America. And so when we were presented with this challenge, I said, let's be proactive. Let's come up with our own standards. Let's try to make something that balances the needs of the industry, but also protects the public, protects our roadways, and protects our infrastructure that we already have. So we felt that by doing this, we would be proactive in getting something adopted. So let's talk a little bit about some disadvantages of microtrenching. Sometimes when you don't have standards, you can have microtrenching done on roadways that are not of good quality, so you can have problems with how the infrastructure is installed. Other challenges with how they do their installation, non-continuous construction. Sometimes quality control can be poor with microtrenching. The shallower depths of installation also presents risks for our maintenance, and also typical contractors who install other types of utilities, they don't expect fiber utilities to be very shallow, and so there's a potential for utility conflicts there. So those are some of the challenges. Let's see here. So one thing I want to talk about is the impact of pavement cuts. So when we talk about microtrenching, we're talking about cutting into the pavement section, placing a fiber conduit within that roadway section, and then backfilling it. So every time we make a pavement cut, it introduces a weakness or a weak point into the roadway, which is an area where we could have structural failure, water infiltration, surface degradation, and other types of issues. So over time, if it's not done properly, we could have increased maintenance burden and increased costs. And you could see there in that photo that's a microtrench that essentially failed. You've got cracking along the edge and differential settling. So it becomes a maintenance concern. So when we cut through anytime we cut the pavement, it introduces a challenge for us. So here's some photos of some particularly problematic microtrenching installations. So there on the left, we see partial failure of the trench, and you can see the exposed conduit there, so that's going to have to be repaired. There in the middle slide, we see that that line that was installed on pavement that was not in quite the best condition. So now with this installation, you'll probably have pieces of the asphalt have to be removed and replaced. And there on the right, the mastic sealer was placed too low, so now we've got an area for water to sit, or it'll capture tires of people driving, or if someone's riding their bike there, it could also be a problem as well.
Mr. Chair, quick question.
Yeah. Sure.
Mr. Wanamaker, on the picture on the right, is that because when they put the, lack of a better word, spackle in the hole to fill it, right, they didn't put enough in and let it settle long enough before they possibly come back and fix it before they put the mastic on? Is that?
Yeah, that's potentially what happened there. Or when they backfill with a slurry, they didn't fill it up high enough, and so that gap was too much. That mastic sealer, it's very liquidy. It's basically
surface.
Like a crack seal.
It's a crack seal. So the problem is we'd have to regulate how well they fill it before they put essentially the crack seal on top of it.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
So here's some more photos here showing some of the challenges and problems that may come up when we talk about microtrenching. There on the left, we've got some surface that's worn away, creates a very rough surface. Can also create problems with capturing your tires. It looks bad too. There in the middle, we have a very thin asphalt section, and so you've got the asphalt chipping off, and that's going to require a pretty substantial repair. So that may have been a roadway where microtrenching would not have been appropriate. And of course, on the right, we also have, again, that slurry backfill wasn't put in to a high enough level, so now you've got a visible subsurface roadway surface there. So with that said, there are some advantages to microtrenching, and this is where we want to consider what the good things that come with this. So first is quicker installation. So according to pretty much all industry that I've talked to, when we talk about microtrenching, the installation of that fiber utility can be up to 80% faster than traditional methods. So they can do thousands of linear feet per day versus hundreds with traditional methods. Less impact on traffic and the public, and again, that comes with the speed of the installation. And another thing to point out is when they're working in the pavement, that means they're not working in the public utility easement, which the public utility easement is typically in people's front yards. And so if you've got landscaping in your front yard, grass or bushes or even other types of hardscape features, it can be a problem when a utility wants to come in and put something underground. It can be very disruptive. And you also have in your public utility easement your service laterals, like your sewer line, your electrical line, coming from that underground, under the roadway, up to your house. So there's always a potential for a utility conflict there in that public utility easement. Another challenge with the public utility easement, though, is there's many other utilities that are in that easement. So sometimes it's much quicker and easier and safer to work within the pavement. Of course, lower installation costs, and they're less likely to hit or conflict with existing utilities. So this table shows basically a comparison of different methods for installing underground fiber. So with the microtrenching method, for example, one thing I like to point out is they have, according to the data that I was able to find, the least amount of utility strikes per mile as compared to all other methods. So it's a relatively safe and safe installation method, and results in the least amount of utility disruptions. So, and you can see there how much they can install per day versus the other methods.
Chris?
Yes.
How, they got different depths here, 16, 24, 48, 120, that's 10 feet.
Yes.
So they can vary the depth. I didn't think they could do, I didn't think it was that much.
Yeah, so like with the microtrenching, the depth depends on the diameter of the, essentially it's a saw blade that they're using to cut into the pavement. 24 is on the high end. There's equipment that can't do that. It's kind of specialized, but that does range. With directional boring, you know, you're driving the bore head and you can go down and then back up.
You can get across.
Yeah. So they typically don't go that deep for directional boring, but that's if they need to go under, say, a buried irrigation line or something else. They'd avoid a conflict.
So, Mr. Chair.
Let me just finish my thought here for a second. So, I mean, 20 to 24 inches seems pretty safe. I guess the challenge is the compaction, going back, the backfill, and to have that slurry sealed, not flush. I don't know. I mean, first of all, we do inspect after this, probably in a couple of different. One, check the depth. Two, check the backfill.
Yep.
They have to do a compaction test.
Yes.
And
yeah.
then the materials that are used for the surface, be it asphalt or whatever. There's some testing to that. And isn't there a warranty to some of this? I mean, can't we say, hey, it failed, and what's our typical warranty period? Is it a year or 2 years?
Yeah, Chairman. Our warranty, we do have a warranty. It is 1 year typically. I'll get into a little bit more of that later, because part of the standards is we're going to need to eventually update all of our license agreements that we have with all the different companies, because we want to make sure that we have provisions in those agreements to protect our roadways from things like you're talking about. So we would amend those agreements to add additional provisions for like extended warranty or additional practices to make sure that pavement is protected.
Okay.
So.
And the other side of that, you asked some of the questions, but also if you're going to slice up the street a little bit, wouldn't it be, if we're going to have a hybrid where sometimes it's missile boards, whatever, the lateral drilling, and sometimes it's this, would it not be best to have it on a street that's scheduled to be, milled and repaved, rather than one that's, oh, look, it's freshly done, let's cut a hole in it. So we'd have to have some kind of limit there.
Yeah, Chairman, Vice Chairman McClure, yeah, great question. So part of this too would have a hierarchy where when a project comes in, we would evaluate it, and microtrenching wouldn't necessarily be the first choice. We would look at more traditional methods and see, does that make sense? Because again, we want to protect our roadway, we want to protect the public. We want to make sure that what is ultimately done is the best option given all the circumstances. So we want to go through that. And we also have a pavement cut ordinance that does prevent fresh pavement from being cut. And I got a slide on that later too, but yeah.
So we're just jumping ahead of your.
No, that's
program.
fine. I appreciate the questions and the engagement.
Well, I was going to say, I would envision some kind of a matrix too, because if there's room off of the pavement and in the utility easement, I mean, no, you're going to have to go there. I mean, they can't just decide on their own that they want to go in the street. I think we have to have some criteria before they do that. It would be scenarios where there's very little shoulder or very little room back into the public utility easement area, and I don't know that I'd be cutting through intersections. I'd probably require that to be a bore, most likely.
Right, Chairman, appreciate that. Yeah, and those are excellent pieces of feedback, and I do have some slides addressing some of those
We're
things.
getting ahead of him.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, I've been to this rodeo, so.
So, well, just moving along here, I just wanted to show a couple photos of some successful installations there on the left. It's a very clean, straight line, flush with the surface. So that was a successful installation. Here in the middle, you can barely see it, but it's there along the curb line. Essentially just looks like a darkened area. They did a good job of keeping it straight, flush, clean, and should be a good quality job there. And then on the right, we've got one that's offset from the curb line there, and also flush. So that was another one. So let's talk about standards. So I did mention earlier, not many other agencies have microtrenching standards. City of Mesa has the most comprehensive standard out there. It's being used by many companies for installation, obviously in City of Mesa, but I believe it's also being used in other jurisdictions. They've just adopted it by proxy. Town of Gilbert has a draft. I don't think they've adopted it yet. City of Scottsdale, they had one, and then I believe they repealed it or expired it because, to my knowledge, nobody actually used it. And then ADOT has a standard that they've used on some projects. It's not like an adopted standard, but it's something that they've approved for some specific uses. And then I did want to mention Maricopa County. They are planning, at least according to the people I talked to, planning to adopt something this year, but I don't know what that is. I haven't seen that. And then another thing to mention is MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments. They did convene a technical working group in March of this year to discuss this very topic. A lot of good feedback from agencies there, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And it would be good to have a MAG standard that everyone could use, but their timeline is much longer than us, so we need to get something done sooner. So, let's see here. So just real quick on the looking at the standards, here's a screenshot from the City of Mesa detail. Just one thing to point out, they allow a maximum 2.5-inch wide trench, 10 inches of cover on arterial streets, and 6 inches on local and collector streets. Pretty shallow. And they avoid any concrete, so if there's concrete, they've got to go around it or under it. Then you're not supposed to cut the concrete. And then they also have some provisions to address bike lanes, and you can see there in that detail, if there is a bike lane, they have to go to the left of that bike lane. But there's actually several sheets. I just wanted to show one of them there. Town of Gilbert draft, very simple. They had the microtrench there against the gutter line there. Very simple, but a narrower trench is what is allowed. But they did, one thing that I did like about it is they wanted it to be below the base course of the roadway, so it wouldn't affect the structural section of the pavement. It did require slurry backfill and then 6-inch wide asphalt sealant. Scottsdale is unique. They had this standard where instead of using a mastic sealer, they actually did a asphalt T-top, so that once the microtrench was put in, they would mill a 24-inch wide section and then replace that with brand new asphalt. So this is something that we like because this is a way to prevent that differential settling, prevent water from intruding into the crack that is formed, and it's a much higher quality, long-term way to address some of the concerns that we have about microtrenching. So as you'll see later, the standard that we're proposing is very similar to this.
Can you, well, obviously, Mr. Wanamaker, you can mill that narrow milling machine? Because, I mean, I see the millers go down the road, they're 10 feet wide, right, or 11 feet wide. So you have some micro miller here?
Yeah, they have specialized machines that can do that. So this is a typical mag-type patch where if you're replacing a section, if you've got a trench, you're supposed to replace with asphalt at typically like 24 inches wide.
So then my next question is, that would be much more expensive than
Yes.
just coming back and doing the slurry in the top.
Yes, and this is some of the feedback that I'll talk about later that we received from the industry. As we proposed this, is they said, hey, this is very expensive. It may be cost prohibitive. It may mean that we will just do traditional instead. So that's what some of the feedback is.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then here's an example from the ADOT detail that was used on a couple projects, very similar to the Scottsdale standard, but they did require a 48-inch patch, basically, again, a T-top, asphalt T-top, more robust than what Scottsdale had, but similar in design. So with that said, some of the things that we're considering with our standards is allowing only one microtrench on each side of the road. So we don't want to see our roads cut up all over the place, just one per side. We prefer that if there's curb and gutter, that it be between 6 and 18 inches away from that gutter line, and that's to allow for that T-top to be placed. Minimum 1 inch wide up to 4 inches wide for that trench. 16 inches deep is the minimum, because we want it to be below the roadway structural section, and that with the top of that conduit to be 12 inches deep. Some additional things, slurry backfill, want to make sure it's structurally capable of supporting the traffic loads and also supporting the lateral loads of the pavement on either side of that trench, and so that it doesn't collapse inward. And then again, covering with that mag asphalt T-top. Any road crossings need to be perpendicular, and obviously this microtrench should be used for telecommunications fiber only. We don't want to see people putting water lines there or anything else, and we'll want to have tracer wire. Another thing, avoid manholes, avoid survey monuments, water valves, or anything else. Avoid placement in the wheel path, avoid conflicts with roadway striping. Service laterals should be placed under concrete, curb gutter, and sidewalk. Intersection crossings requires traditional methods. So that's what we were bringing up earlier. Any vaults, pedestals, or anything else need to be behind the sidewalk. That's in the public utility easement. We don't want that in the roadway, obviously. And if there is no public utility easement, it needs to be at the farthest edge of the right-of-way. So here's just a draft detail of everything I just said. We talk about that 24-inch wide T-top. We've got our trench there. And this does allow for up to 2 conduits. So someone could put one in. They could maybe work with another company to put a second one in. Or they could have a backup or whatever. It's just an option. Not sure logistically how that would work. But wanted to make sure we made that available. And again, we want to keep the depth below that structural section of the roadway. So, moving on. Some additional things. Public notification, extremely important. When a fiber company comes in and they want to put this infrastructure, we're going to require them to notify the public. There's going to have to be signage, door hangers, and social media and everything else. We want to make sure the public is well informed of what is going to happen within their neighborhood and when it's going to happen. And then we want to make sure, as far as our permitting goes, that the construction is done in one continuous operation, no phased construction. They can't come in and trench today and then next week run the conduit and then a week later backfill. We want it to be done as a continuous operation. Logical sizes for permits, like one neighborhood or one area at a time. We don't want to have thousands of permits, but we also don't want to have, one permit for 100,000 linear feet. And then night work, that's another thing we want. It says here we may require it on arterial roads. We may change that to will require it on arterial roads, but that's further discussion. I don't know if you guys have any feedback on that. So night work obviously costs more, but it's less disruptive to the public. So I mentioned pavement cut ordinance earlier, so just here's a brief slide on that. So any new roads or recently reconstructed roads, I'm not going to allow any pavement cuts within that first year. But between 1 and 2 years, we will allow it, but then they'll have to pay a pretty steep fee. That's in that ordinance that this board passed a number of years ago. Any recently maintained or preserved roads also have to pay a fee and then have to reseal it. Now, to the question that was asked earlier, when we start working with these companies, as we do now, we try to coordinate that work with any work that we are also doing ourselves and work of other companies, other developers or whatever. So we want to make sure that disruption to the public is minimized and that we do things as logical as possible. So some additional things that we're still working out when it comes to these standards is again, all other alternatives must be considered first. I want to make sure that, if there's nothing in the PUE and it's available, go ahead and use that first. Another thing is multiple users. We have to be careful about exclusivity. So although, again, we are proposing allowing only one trench per side of the road, that doesn't prevent future providers from coming in and using traditional methods for installing their own. Again, we talk about bike lanes, wheel path, service laterals. Want to make sure we go under the sidewalk. We also need to look at what is the existing roadway condition. If it's a chip seal road, probably don't want to use microtrenching. If the road is very poor quality, probably don't want to use microtrenching. So we need to build that into the standards. And then again, I mentioned amendments and revisions to the license agreements. And that's to protect the roadway and have a more robust warranty provisions for this type of work. Let's see here. So on May 12th, just a few weeks ago, we did hold a stakeholder meeting with industry. We had representatives from many companies that provide internet, that provide installation services for fiber. Had about 50 or so people attend. The meeting was recorded if anybody's interested in watching that meeting. It was about an hour and a half long. So what we did with this meeting is we requested input from those industry folks, on the practicality and feasibility of these standards. We also wanted to get feedback from them on what their experience was with existing standards and what best practices, suggestions for improvements, challenges that the industry face, and also concerns about costs, implementation procedures, permit problems, things like that. So we got a lot of good feedback from this meeting, and I kind of just tried to sum it up in these maybe 3 bullet points here. A lot of the industry folks, they wanted it to be shallower, because obviously shallower costs less and it's faster. So generally, the deeper you go, the longer it takes, and so that's a consideration. The preference from the industry side seems to be they want the microtrench to be against the curb, which is what we were showing in some of those earlier photos, and that's like the City of Mesa standard, for example. In many of the companies' experience, they believe that led to better results and less likely to have pavement damage. And again, there were concerns about the T-top patch being cost prohibitive. But I did want to highlight this, so we have some feedback from agencies, and this was from the MAG meeting, the technical working group, and also just my conversations that I've had with various agencies, just calling people that I know and asking them questions. And it's in general, there's a hesitancy to allow microtrenching because we're essentially having utility shallower than what is normally allowed. And there are a lot of the risks of the roadway are still kind of unknown because this is still kind of new. Again, there's no standards out there. So the general consensus seemed to be if we accepted a microtrenching standard, it should be limited to local or residential streets only. And in some cases, they said we should require a mill and overlay or an asphalt patch, which is what we're proposing, to prevent that water infiltration. And most agencies seem to agree that license agreements also need to be updated to account for risks associated with this. So, a couple of things on the next steps. So we're going to continue to refine the standards that we've proposed, put together a much better package to address a lot of the things that I mentioned here. We're going to have another industry stakeholder meeting in a couple weeks during our public comment period to get some more, hopefully specific feedback. I want to make sure that they're engaged and kind of address their concerns. And then we're going to finalize the comprehensive detailed drawings and specifications. So kind of our timelines, a very quick timeline. As I mentioned there, May 12th, we had the stakeholder meeting. Today is our work session. Next week, we'll be publishing the notice of hearing, start the 30-day comment period. Near end of July, end of comment period, publish our final standards, and then hopefully come back August 6th to adopt something, and we'll have that public hearing at that time. So we do have a website with a lot of this information, which you can submit your feedback there. That way, if anybody in the public who's watching this and they have questions or concerns or comments, they can go and submit their comments that way. And there's that. So I know that was a ton of information. I don't know if you guys have any specific feedback. You like microtrenching, you hate it,
Mr. Chair,
don't want to see it.
I do have a comment. So in listening to your project and your program here, if you did a T-top pavement fill, it seems to me that would create 2 crack seals that you've got to fill at some future point, right? Because whenever you join the pavements together, that's when they separate, and then you got to crack seal it. I mean, I'm thinking of my own neighborhood. And next to the curb, you got to crack seal. If you did it right next to the curb or the concrete barrier there, what's the general depth of the roadbed? It's like the pavement plus.
Well, on a local
compaction.
street, it'd be like 8 to 10 inches.
8 to 10 inches. Okay, so you're down. So at that point, then, if you're only 1.5 inches wide or whatever, it would seem that if you did that and slurried it and obviously checked before, sign off on it before they can lay the sealer on top, you don't have 1 seam to fill rather than 2. Just in a future process, and of course, granted, at some point the road gets milled and resurfaced, but that's a 7 to 10 year program, something like it seems to me from conversations. So that it just seems like there would be a lot of extra crack sealing.
No, I appreciate the feedback. So yeah, with this proposed standard here, the T-top would essentially be at the gutter line, so you would still only have 1 crack. That'd be the idea, because this wouldn't be in the middle of the road. It'd be, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, but so if I did it at the gutter line, here's my curb edge right here, and then here's my cut. Well, if I go out here, it's not a T, it's an L.
Right.
So I'm having a problem with that, trying to conceptualize that.
Sure. Yeah. So if you look at this detail here with the L-shaped cut, as you called it there, any water infiltration at the crack would then be stopped and have to move horizontally to then go further. So it would essentially act as like a buffer to prevent that water from getting down further into that pavement section. But great observation that essentially you're just moving the crack to another location.
Right.
So
anyway, that's just in my layman's terms here. You're the engineer. You guys have fun, but I'm just trying to conceptualize the issue.
Because it seems like you're really leaning on this T-top side. And I had the same thoughts about the L shape versus the T-top shape, but I don't know. And really, I hope that there's a lot of collaboration with the industry that has to go through this. This is new, and I suspect we'll find in 4 or 5 years we might even have to tweak it a little bit because there may be something we're not seeing today that'll pop up in time.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. Yeah. I believe the T-top is a great option, although it is more expensive. And but the reason why we feel this way is because when we're looking at something that is relatively new, I want to try to propose something that's a higher quality, a higher standard to protect that roadway that has the longest, best chance of being successful.
No, I get that. I understand the
And-
theory there.
And I did not include it in this presentation, but we did a lot of research on other jurisdictions outside of Arizona. And again, there's a mix of standards out there, but this T-top method is used in many other jurisdictions in the country. So this isn't completely brand new.
No, I understand.
It does
Okay.
get rid of,
Well,
it does
I
get
think
rid of the
there's-
slurry issue.
Yeah, I mean, the cost, I mean, and that's what it always comes down to, because if we're trying to, find the sweet spot as far as, what's going to give us the best product, but yet still make it affordable to put this conduit in the ground. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And the compromising of the roadways that are owned by the people, that we wanted to have its integrity upheld. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get there.
Chairman, Chris, thanks for the presentation. Just to let you know, in my previous life in the plumbing industry, I would highly stay away from the sealant. I just bad situations.
From the what?
The sealant one where they had the seal, the crack sealant. He called it with something different, but the issue is with that is that it always sinks, and you're going to definitely have the issue there. I do like between seeing this again, working in the plumbing industry, working in streets. I like the idea of the Scottsdale and the Mesa, kind of a crossbreed between the two.
Okay.
I think that both of those. But the main thing is no sealant. I would
Okay.
just highly stay away from it. Thanks.
I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions?
Nothing else?
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thank you very much.
Item number 3 is a presentation and discussion for request the Justice of the Peace Courts and to raise Pinal County Court costs recovery.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Supervisor, Sean Babu. I serve as the presiding Justice of the Peace for our 6 justice courts here in Arizona, or in Pinal County. For the presentation,
Give her a minute there. She'll get you.
how do we, you're getting it on there. Got it. So just for the record, in terms of the presentation, we didn't get it in time to be on the agenda for the last few days in Novus. So the presentation has been provided to the clerk of the board, and it will be available.
Okay.
Great. Terrific. So I'm here today to talk about cost recovery. It's a fee that Board of Supervisors approve that gets affixed to certain case types within the justice court and request increasing that fee. Haven't used this before, but so this fee was initially established by the Board of Supervisors back in 1998. It's a $20 fee, hasn't been raised since 1998. The ordinance was revised in 2006 just to kind of give some clarification on what case types that fee should be applied to and to change the process for use of that fee. The collection fees are used to modernize, streamline, automate the court, and to secure the court facilities. It's a fee that's assessed on defendants who've been found guilty or plead guilty to criminal offenses or found responsible or plead responsible on civil traffic violations. So those are the case types that it's applied to. The general fund, the main purpose of the cost recovery is to relieve, in terms of the impact of court costs, to the general fund. The dollars that come back to the general fund through fees aren't, it's not a dollar for dollar match. The difference in this current fiscal year, and this is just based off of recent projections from the finance department, so 11 good months, and then the current data just projected out in terms of the last month. $1.9 million difference in terms of what the county spends to operate our justice courts solely for the general fund in terms of personnel and operating expenses. That doesn't take into account the building, right, electricity, all those other things that the county obviously pays for. Increasing the cost recovery from $20 to a $40 fee would bring in approximately $670,000. This current fiscal year, we're looking at $330,000 that'll come into that account. Here's just a layout in terms of all our 6 justice courts and what these numbers in terms of the general fund budget for this fiscal year. That's what we're projected to spend based off of the projections from Budget and Finance. So like my court, the Pioneer Justice Court, just slightly under $1 million in terms of the expenses. Revenues generated from my court back to the general fund solely is a little over $931,000. But you can see at the end, right, 4.6 or almost 4.7 million that the county expends, 2.7 in terms of what comes back in regards to fines and fees that come back to the county. The difference again is at 1.9. And not that we're, just going to go back to that real quick, not that we're a revenue source in terms of the court system, right? It's to uphold the law, instill justice, but those are things to think about and look at as the courts move forward. People who say, hey, the courts are just a money collection scheme, right? All the fines and things that are imposed, they haven't seen a chart like this in terms of the cost that goes into operating the courts.
Go back to that slide.
Yeah,
real quick.
absolutely.
The Copper Corridor and the Casa Grande Court are struggling to collect.
So there's a lot of different things that go into the revenue component and the difference between what's the county expends in the general fund and then what comes in terms of fines and fees. Copper Corridor specifically, right, you're operating, the county board of supervisors made a decision previously to operate 2 courts, right? So they have the main court is in Superior, satellite courts in Oracle. Okay. So in terms of staffing, we kind of equate how we get to a clerk, 1,000 case filings per clerk. So like they may have, forget the exact number, but in terms of what their numbers are, say they have 4,000 case filings. So under normal circumstances, that call for 4 clerks. But because they're operating 2 different courts, right, you have to staff that other court facility, so they have 6 clerk staff as opposed to only having 4.
3 and 3?
So they have 2 at the Superior Court because they mainly operate out of the what's designated as a satellite court in Oracle. So the other clerk staff are there. They also have 2 judicial office supervisors that operate in that. One's over in the Superior Justice Court and the other one in Oracle.
So it's not necessarily the revenue, it's the cost to run the courts in this case.
So for Copper Corridor specifically, there's a reason for that difference, right, in terms of the amount of revenues. They don't have as many case filings that are coming in, so you're not, in terms of fines that are getting imposed when people are found guilty or plead guilty or responsible, you're not going to have as many as, say, Santan Valley.
And they're lesser charges too, lesser fines in many cases.
No, so we do have a standard fine schedule here in Pinal County. We're looking to update that in terms of the Title 13 and Title 28. We're hoping to do that by July. And but everybody has the same fine schedule, right? In our operating system, if it's driving on a suspended license, it'll pull up $530. Now that takes into account the base fine, which is probably $120. Everything else on there are surcharges and fees, right? So our cost recovery fee is $20. With the state surcharges added to that, it equals $35.60, right? So that goes right on top of the base fine. And then you have all the surcharges tacked on by the state that pay for everything from prison construction, elected officials' retirement fund, probation, officer safety equipment, training. So there's a whole host of things that get kind of pulled out of those dollar figures. For instance, for my justice court this year, we're on target to hit $2.3 million in terms of our revenues that come in. Probably 1.3 million of that stay within the county. The rest goes to the state for various, spending that they have set up through those surcharges and fees. Now, part of for that 1.3 or more, and that's not an exact number, but in cost recovery for my court, we're going to hit 120,000 in terms of that. They have a judicial enhancement fund that is about 100,000. So those are special revenue accounts that are available within the justice court to pay for other things.
What year did we split from 8 courts to 6 courts? I was.
So that was 6 years ago.
It was 6 years ago.
I think the board made that
2018.
decision. So this is the fifth year of operation.
2018, 2019. No, it was before that. Okay.
Well, I think what I wanted to get to, I'd like to see your aging sheet. I mean, how are we
See the
carrying,
what? Excuse me.
Like, how much are we carrying on the books that haven't been paid? I mean,
In terms of fines and fees?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
every time I've gone to court.
So that is one of the
Do that a lot?
things, right?
Yeah.
That
So observe.
Oh.
When I go to observe, I always notice like they always, they've got a whole lot of fines. It's you see a lot of the same people.
Sure.
And but they're never caught up, on those fees. They're always in. I guess is it an income problem for these people in the Copper Corridor that maybe that those dollars? I mean, you're carrying a lot on the books, I think.
They could be. In terms of into their database, I don't have access to theirs specifically.
Okay.
But that is one of the components, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the revenues that are brought in. You got to hold people accountable in terms of when they plead guilty or found guilty. If you impose a sentence and one of those is a monetary sum, you got to hold them accountable after the fact to make sure that they're following through with those things. And so that's once a week we set those in my court, and I think other courts should be doing that as well.
Okay, and then I guess the breakdown to the amount of money that gets sent to the state that we get to keep and gets sent to the state, and how those are broken down. I'd really like to see more detail on that because, frankly, I'm trying to figure out why we're sending it to the state. We ought to keep most of it ourselves and spend very little to the state, or they can send it right back to us if they'd like.
Yeah, so that's all legislative directed, right? That's all law.
Oh, I understand that. But I'm just trying to get to, this is not the first time in the 13 years I've been here that we've addressed these issues. So, I know 2006 you said is the last time they were adjusted. Is that what you had on there?
In terms of the cost recovery fee?
Yeah.
No, so that was when it was originally established in 98, so it was $20. It hasn't been changed since then, right? Just taking in inflation into account, it would equal $40
I'm bogging this thing down, and I apologize, but I'm just trying to...
No, I get that that's a big number.
It's a big number.
In terms of that.
Yeah,
and
almost $2 million.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Babu, I just wanted to ask to understand. So even with that 20 to 40, it would recover about 675,000. You said.
Correct.
Okay, so we'd still be about a 1.3 million, roughly, like you just $1.2 million.
So we're talking general fund monies in regards to this particular slide, and that's one of the purposes for the cost recovery is to not continue to incur a burden on the taxpayers for additional costs.
Right.
What's not in the general fund budget, the 4.6, right? We pay for 6 security officers out of that cost recovery. This year, that cost is about $425,000. We're only bringing in $330,000 this year in terms of cost recovery. So that account It carries over year. Start of this fiscal year was at just over $1 million in terms of what is in that cost recovery account. As we are going to go into the next fiscal year, it's going to be 800 and I have it on a slide here, but say 870,000. That's going to continue to drop as the cost for security seems like it's continued to rise in terms of the amount that we expend with that. There's also technology stuff, right, that have come, that the courts use that rather than come to the board and say, hey, I need $60,000 to update the audio equipment in the courtroom or the AV equipment so that I can do Zoom conferencing in the court, have virtual hearings, right, to do those things. That everything's progressing towards that.
So what I was getting at is actually, even if you doubled it to 80, you'd still be running at a negative deficit.
Yeah, but that's not included in these at all anyhow, but it's a separate account, it's a side account that's available to the courts to use through a process that has to be approved by ordinance, approved by the presiding judge of the Superior Court, and then the county manager, right? So it's an approval process before that gets expended, so that ensures, hey, it's following the ordinance in terms of the purpose for the expense.
Okay, I just don't like running in a deficit.
Yeah, no. Well, in terms for the court purposes, right, that's not the big thing for the court. We're not trying to impose fines.
It's not an enterprise operation. Yeah.
Correct. But obviously it is a thing for you to look at with this just is the authorization for legal authority for the ordinance, right, by statute. It was previously adopted by the Board of Supervisors back in 1998. So that's what we're operating off of right now. How it works, fees are collected, they're deposited into the Justice Court Recovery Fund. Now that's managed by the Finance Department, right? And they separate that by each court, right? They identify Pioneer Justice Court, Apache Junction Justice Court, and any fees that come in, cost recovery fees that come in from that court, they get allotted to their account. It's one account, but on a ledger shows each court separately in terms of what's brought in. Now, those things, as I referenced, can be used for modernizing, automating court systems, improving security, streamlining operations. As we move to everything digital, the Supreme Court soon going to mandate that any civil case that is filed by an attorney gets filed electronically. So we have to accept those all electronically. We have to scan other documents in when they come in, or old files. We're scanning them into the system, so it's purchasing scanners and equipment to be able to do that. Improving security. Each of our courts have an x-ray machine as you come in, a walk-through scanner. So ideally, when those come time for them to be replaced, they come out of cost recovery, right? It's not coming to the board to say, hey, we need $50,000 to replace this scanner that's in the lobby and required for security purposes. So any expenditure, again, goes to the presiding judge of the Superior Court and then the county manager for final sign-off on that, and then it's sent to the Finance Department. Currently, it's $20 in terms of that Justice Court enhancement fee, the cost recovery fee. There's also, within that ordinance, a non-sufficient fund fee for $25. Those both get deposited into that account. They've been in place for the past 27 years and haven't been changed since then. This is that chart just in terms of showing since 1920, in terms of the fiscal years, where at the bottom of the page you can see what that fund balance is for each court, for that account total. Last fiscal year, next to the two over from the blue line, it's $1,028,000 is what we had in that account total. The projections in terms of the revenues are that $334,000 on the blue line. That 30,000 figure is interest on the account, and that's on the total $1 million account. So that's going to be the interest component, but it's added to that account. The expenditures, the personnel, right, the 431,000. That's money that gets transferred for payment on those 6 court security officers. That under that, it looks like there's a $90,000 amount. That's mainly the copper corridor, updating their communication systems within the courtroom in regards to all the equipment in there, right? So they're able to do not only the virtual hearings with the jail, make sure that those run smoothly, but also any litigants that are out of the area to be able to appear remotely as well. So, and that total $522,000 this year. We only brought in total with interest $364,000. So you see at the bottom there, we're starting the next fiscal year at $870,000, which is a good sum. But if we continue on that trend, it's going to be a depleted amount, and those security costs are going to come back in terms of the general fund rather than the special revenue account. So our request is to raise it to $40. The non-sufficient fund fee, leave it the same. We don't have a lot of that. We don't accept checks from individuals. And this would be adopted at a subsequent public hearing or meeting from the Board of Supervisors. We require a 15-day notice period, so if the board gave some direction, yeah, let's move forward with this, then we would give public notice, publication, and we have to do it for 15 days and hopefully be back in July before the board to have that vote. These are just in regards to the e-filing, virtual hearings, digital recordings, security equipment that I already referenced, and then security upgrades. Courts in the Maricopa Justice Court, or it's now called the Western Pinal Justice Court, they have some security issues over there in terms of access where you can walk out the door to and the back side of the courtroom that's not secure, and it goes right into a staffing area. That shouldn't be the case, but there was no good way to, you have to have another exit out of the courtroom, right? The one that you came in, and then you have to have one that you can leave with. Like my court, we have the way you can leave is to the left, then there's a secure door that goes into my office areas, right? So where staff work. So that door doesn't, the one that they leave through doesn't have any access in terms of where court staff are. So they have that there, and it's going to be at a substantial cost in terms of trying to fix that. Ideally, that comes out of cost recovery. And
that was a design flaw, and that's been there for a while.
It's from the get-go.
That's where they come across with the prisoners into the courtroom, and then there's the other way to do it.
Do this stuff?
All they got to do is put a door in with a key card, and it would solve it.
They need to put in a wall it off where I guess the sheriff's office has access to that area and to their part, and that's where the issue became, I guess, when that building was built. I wasn't part of that, but it needs to be walled off, key card access to it, and then you also have to key card those doors that are in the courtrooms, right, so that you lock them so they're secure but still have access for court security.
It's been like that for 5 years?
Yes.
The whole time.
Been like it was called to my attention years ago, and we tried to do something. Oh, you can't put a door there. Anyway, we're off subject, but
all right.
Yeah. But even the Casa Grande Justice Court, right? The courtroom is across the hall from public access, right? So most courts, the judicial officer is going to go through an area to get into the courtroom, right? A side door that gives them access to that. The judicial officer in Casa Grande Justice Court has to walk through a lobby full of people, right, that to get to the courtroom. That's not a safe environment in regards to that. Now, I guess they've had estimates that were pretty high in the past, and so it's never been something that has been completed. But I know that's on the radar for the judge in Casa Grande to try to get that fixed and have that security measure. That was it. Any other questions for me?
Well,
Outside of...
reaching out to Angie for a little more detail, but anyway.
Yes,
okay.
and Supervisor Miller or Chairman Miller, I'd be more than happy to show you the breakdown in terms of fines that are imposed. If there's a way for our operating system to kind of track, we track a ton of stuff. I just don't know in terms of the dollar amount how much is outstanding in terms of that's not on a warrant status.
No,
right?
I understand. But I'll just be right up front because I mean, we've talked about this stuff over the years and stuff, and the idea though that you are actually state employees, it all kind of operates off the state side of things on the judicial side of things.
Well,
am I
Chairman,
is that not correct?
We're administratively, the Supreme Court can direct us to do certain things.
I know. Anyway, I'd like to see the state participate in this a little bit more, or partner with us on this to soften some of these costs, rather than us passing them on down. And so anyway, and that's a long discussion that we can have at another time. But I think that there should be some other ways.
Just quickly with that, Chairman Miller, Superior Court staff are state employees. So in the Superior Court, they're all state employees.
Yeah.
Justice Court, they're all county employees. Okay. Everybody's a county employee that's there. And so that's be the difference where they should be contributing. I think they do to the Superior Court, but they don't in regards to the Justice Court. The legislature just tax on surcharges and fees to send their way.
And they ask for all this stuff, or they send this stuff down on us, and it just comes out of our coffers.
And truly, in statute, if you were cited for a seatbelt violation, statute will tell you that the fine on that is $10. Now, when somebody comes to the court and it's $100, they're like, statute says $10.
Yeah.
That's all the surcharges and fees that are mandatory
that's
to be put on.
That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
And if we got to keep 90 of that $100, that would be a different deal.
Any other questions at all?
Anyway, okay.
So our plan is to kind of move forward with the $40 request in the future, because that's what we're going to put in publication and send out in public notices, and for that 15-day time period with it. So, all right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Item 4, you're back up here.
That's me too. So no presentation with this one. This is an ordinance that's been in place for a public service fee. It was put in place back in, I think it was 2005, when there were issues over in the Maricopa Justice Court. And that was a seized court at the time. Chairman Miller may recall that media was asking for all types of information and documents from the court. Mm-hmm. There was no mechanism to charge for that. And in statute, there is a mechanism to charge certain fees on civil cases, but not on criminal cases or civil traffic cases. So this ordinance, there was an ordinance that was imposed to allow for the collection of fees on criminal cases and civil traffic cases. And that's could be a research fee, right? Certifying documents on it. And these would be not for a defendant, right, who comes in and wants something for their case. It'd be for a company that's doing a background check for employment purposes. It'd be for like a media request. Hey, I want these documents on this individual. There is one thing that's on the current proposed fee schedule that we want to strike, and we'll do that. That's a subpoena on criminal cases. we certainly wouldn't charge a fee for a defendant requests a subpoena on a criminal case to litigate the charges. So that part, it's on civil, so it's just kind of copied and paste for it. We're going to strike it from this schedule when we go to post that notice and do the publication for it. The reason for getting rid of the current ordinance and just replacing it with this one is because we removed, the old one had all the civil fees on there and directed in terms of the collection of those. But statute requires us to do that, and then there's a formula based off of a county population of how much comes back to the county, how much stays at the state level for these types of fees. So if we had it on the ordinance, we should have been charging it twice, right? Because the ordinance gave us permission to do it, and then the statute told us to do it as well. So we're just removing the civil parts and leaving the criminal case types, because that's why it was originally instituted in the first place.
Okay.
So, quick question.
Sure.
When was that put in place? You said 2000?
2005, I think it was.
Okay, so to back up then, if the other one was 2006 and hasn't been increased since 2000 or 98, whenever, way back anyway.
Yeah.
You're doing 100% increase. You're only doing a 32% increase here. Why the difference in numbers? Just for fun.
On the civil side, the fees, they just increased from the $28 to the $33. So on civil case types. So that's why we started to look at this, because it still called for the $28. So we wanted to mirror the fees that were charged on civil cases through statute and administrative order from the courts that says, hey, charge $33 for issuance of a writ. So we're just bringing these up to match those same levels in terms of.
Okay, so there's some precedent for that. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions in regards to this one?
Nope.
I'm always open. If you have any questions about the justice courts, I'm always open to kind of share information with the board. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Okay. We're adjourned. Unless somebody had a question.